Avatar: The Last Airbender Netflix TV series, probably one of the most anticipated Netflix shows to have come out within the past few years. This show's been in development for quite some time, and it's been anticipated on both sides, whether if it was going to be good and pay respects to the animated show, or bad and probably pay more respects to the M. Night Shyamalan movie version. And needless to say, it didn't come without its controversies. The original creators had a hand on it for 1 or 2 episodes and then parted ways due to creative differences with the newer creators, because the newer creators wanted to do something that was a bit more in lines with Game of Thrones, and it made some of their own changes to the series that we get to see culminate throughout the course of these 8 episodes. And having watched all 8 episodes and essentially wasted 8 hours of my life just so that way I could post this a week after it had come out, way after anybody else who has made their reviews, it's giving me time to marinate a little bit and try to come up with better thoughts on what makes this show alive, in a way, lack of a better term, because it's got some rough edges. So spoilers, if you want to watch this, you're going to need them, because there are some changes in the Netflix show compared to the animated show. Even though, yes, there are going to be a lot of stuff that is very reminiscent or does exist in the animated series, they do make changes to just not only the characters, but even scenery and some of the storylines. So I think the best place to start is where the good came in, and the good came into a lot of the visuals. The visuals were very pleasing to the eye, whether if it was the character costume design or the animations of some of the other characters like Appa and Momo, or even bringing all of the choreography and the CGI of the fight scenes with the bending between the firebenders, earthbenders, airbenders, waterbenders, all that stuff. The visuals and everything when it came to the eye was very pleasing. Yes, there were definitely some moments where the fight scenes looked a bit bumbly, especially with the Fire Nation basically having Stormtrooper aim, but a lot of scenes like Ozai fighting Zuko, or even Zuko fighting Aang, or a lot of this stuff when it came to the fight scenes and just character visualization was a pretty good job. But I feel like the good aspects of the show end there, because once we start getting into this other side of watching a show, the listening part is when things get really weak in the end, because the writing in this was just so bad that it pulls you away from watching the show, because now you're just starting to poke fun at a lot of what the characters are saying. And this isn't to discredit the abilities of the actors. A lot of the actors did, I think, a pretty good job with what they were given. The person who was playing as Aang, I feel like, nailed their role as Aang. They looked and sounded exactly like how Aang would be, but the writing behind the character didn't seem to match up to who he was portrayed to be. And then you have other characters like Ozai, who I think was probably one of the best written ones, and then other characters fall into place too, like Iroh and Zuko, who I thought were pretty good, and then Sokka and Katara, who I thought were a bit on the weaker side. Now, whether if it is writing or the actor's capability, it doesn't matter in the end, because a good actor with really crap writing is just as bad as a bad actor with really good writing, because now you're at the fault and mercy of both factors. And this just has both. You have good actors with bad writing, and then you have bad actors with mediocre writing at best, and then bad writing which makes the bad actors look even worse than what they're supposed to be. Now, what's this bad writing? What exactly are the things that come together with the writing that makes it not enjoyable to watch? Well, the main big thing is the exposition, the constant talking about needing to do things and monologuing and projection and a lot of just explaining what is going on in that moment, or a moment that just happened. This can be seen with Aang having tons of monologues about his responsibilities of being the Avatar, with Zuko going into monologues about why he needed to capture the Avatar. And the fact that that happens so often, enough to where it almost makes the person feel like they don't need to listen to this anymore. We already know the motivations. We already know what they're trying to do or try to become, or what their past is, because they've already explained it before. But instead, they just need to constantly tell you what is happening, to like replace that with character growth, which is another issue that'll come up later on. On top of just constantly telling you what's going on, they also need to tell you exactly what's happening in the moment, and exactly what they're feeling, and exactly what just happened. Almost as if the writers assumed that everybody watching would have brain damage and don't remember exactly what just happened within the past few seconds. And I think one of the biggest scenes that made me laugh so hard was a scene where Aang and Zuko as the blue spirit, when they were escaping the stronghold, Aang tells Zuko while they're hiding outside of the stronghold, all those people in there, they're Fire Nation people. Dude, I would not have known that if you hadn't told me. You mean to tell me that everybody inside that stronghold, a place where Fire Nation people captured you, puts you in there within Fire Nation borders, that has Fire Nation regalia all along the stronghold, and firebenders that are attacking you while you're escaping, they were all firebenders? Oh my god. Oh my god, they were all Fire Nation people? Oh my god. Oh my god. Wow, I would not have known that if it weren't for you telling me after I had already seen everything. Thank you. And that's not the first time that they do that. Suki says something along the lines of, I'm not just a warrior, I'm a Kyoshi warrior. And Yue says something along the lines of, the moon spirit has been killed, when we literally witnessed the moon spirit dying right before our very eyes. They do a lot of telling, and don't leave room for the show to marinate into our brains so that way we can formulate exactly what's going on. Even if we've already seen the animated series and know what's going to happen, constant telling takes away from the enjoyment of the show. And I know that a lot of people are saying that this is a trope that Game of Thrones used. I personally have not seen Game of Thrones, but from what I'm aware of, they took a lot of the bad things of Game of Thrones and put that into Avatar, and I feel like that makes it pretty sour. And then we get into the growth of the characters, or lack of growth of the characters, or super fast growth of the characters, because a lot of the characters that go through this series go through varying different growth aspects. And whether if that's because the show writers were rushing some characters or didn't know how to write the characters is beyond my intelligence span. But based off of what I saw, and it's hard to relate, or it's hard not to relate the animated series to this, because they're in a ways different, and I don't want to make that comparison because maybe somebody who hasn't seen the animated series wouldn't know what's going on, or why someone would be mad at the way how these characters are written. But at the end of the day, Sokka, Katara, and Aang are children, and they should essentially act like children. Yes, Sokka needs to be grown, or tries to be grown, because he has to be the quote-unquote defender of the Southern Water Nation, and everybody else that are left as men are kids, essentially, or teenagers. And yeah, he's gonna have this sense of leadership, but at the end of the day, he's still a child. And at this point in the Netflix show, he kind of has no growth at all. And he, in the first book, does experience some growth, because he doesn't believe women can be warriors, then meets Suki, and then wants to train under her so that he can learn how to fight, because even though he is a warrior back at home, he doesn't have good fighting skills. But he doesn't really go through a lot of fighting in the Netflix TV series. He does a lot of sidelining. He does a lot of pushing people off to the side and trying to protect others, rather than going out there and doing the hand-to-hand combat that he knows, or what little hand-to-hand combat he knows, because that's his character. Instead, he's being pushed off to the side. So we don't get to really see his growth at all. And then Aang is the opposite side of that. Aang is fully grown. Aang is what he should be by book 3. He comes out into the world as a 12-year-old boy 100 years into the future, and immediately knows political intrigue and starts conducting the responsibilities that he needs to do as the Avatar. Yes, he's slow about it. He still doesn't know how to waterbend, at the very least, because he's supposed to know how to waterbend. At least the first thing he should know is how to waterbend. But he immediately comes into the world not acting as a child. He immediately is debating with people and understanding his responsibilities and trying to conduct them and knowing exactly what he needs to do rather than just being a kid and trying to have fun. And the Katara is super fast growth. We go from a person who barely know how to do water bending, can barely get a water droplet off the ground, to Aang just coming into the world and giving her a pep talk saying, you got this. And then now she can freeze people in place immediately and knows hand-to-hand combat without any other training, at least explained, because they do a lot of like stuff in the background. They don't really explain everything that's going on. You don't really see these characters melding together. It's almost assumed like it's in the background that now they're just best friends. Why are they going on this trip with Aang right out the gate? They don't need to go. They can just stay where they are. Aang can just go do whatever he needs. They miss out so much of the growth between all these characters by either shoving it to the side or making it grow so fast that it didn't even have time to mature. And then, of course, you have your differences with the animated series, which, if you are a fan of the animated series, you're probably not going to like, because they change so many things about so many different characters, about so many different storylines. Probably one of the biggest changes that I think is a bit poor is what they did to Boomy, turning Boomy into a bitter, sour old man who just complains all the time, saying things like, where have you been for the past 100 years to Aang and all that, compared to Boomy basically being a man-child in the animated series, which gives a lot of meaning to his trials and challenges that he was trying to give to Aang, because the entire point of the trials and challenges that he was trying to give to Aang in the animated series was to get Aang to remember, or that this is Boomy that you are currently talking to, whereas in the Netflix TV series, all of his challenges and trials are just Boomy enacting his resentment over Aang because Aang has been gone for the past hundreds of years when he could have done something about it. That's just the surface level of things, right? Because there's a lot of crap that they change about certain characters, and not all of them are good. And I feel like, as somebody who has watched the animated series, and anybody else who has watched the animated series, probably would care enough to see these characters come in and be like, why are they here? Or why are they acting like that? And it really just feels like the writers behind this show were just pulling different parts from the animated series and combined it in to try and entice people to be like, oh yeah, the knowledge spirit owl from the library episode, he's in this episode. Yeah, of course you like him, he's here. Or like Jet Li, everybody likes Jet Li, we're gonna put him in episode 3, and just keep pulling every little bit of things that people like. The secret tunnel scene, sure, throw that immediately in there. It feels like they know that it's going to be so bad that they just trying to pull all these different like scenes, nostalgic scenes from the animated series, and just combine it into this season so that way people could watch it. But they do it so poorly that it just sours the entire image of those scenes. Probably one of the biggest ones being Iroh's son's death, where it's supposed to be a very emotional scene. It's supposed to be a very emotional moment for not just the character, but for us, because we want to relate with that character. We want to be able to understand the pain that he's going through. But at best, I feel apathy. At worst, I feel cringe. Because you see the scene and it just feels bland. It feels like it shouldn't belong. And it's not just the Iroh's son's death scene. A lot of the scenes that require emotion or trying to elicit emotion doesn't really do anything for me. Whether it was me, my girlfriend, or somebody else that was watching this thing, I feel like most people didn't really feel anything at all, which surprises me, because I feel like I'm in the minority in terms of what the ratings are for the current show, because they're pretty high, surprisingly. But I feel like they're missing the point. So what does this mean for the Avatar Netflix TV show? I think if you judge based off of what I said in terms of the good and bad, you'll probably know which way I swing. I think at best, if you don't know anything about Avatar, it's going to be a 4, because you're going to be visually pleased, but the moment you open your ears, you're probably not going to like what you're hearing. And if you're a fan of the animated series, you might swing more towards a 3 or a 2, because even though, yes, visually it looks like they're paying their respects, if you just pay attention to it at all, like a semblance of attention, they don't really pay too much respects at all to the animated series. At least in my opinion. You could have a different opinion. And if you do, comment down below. Did you watch it? What's your opinion on the whole thing? But pretty much that's it for me. 4 out of 10 at best, 2 out of 10 at worst. If you like the video, like the video. If you want to leave a comment, leave a comment. Subscribe to the channel. I'm catching all of y'all later. Peace.